When I was 22, I moved into the downstairs apartment of my parents' house. It wasn't anything glamorous, just a converted basement with its own side entrance, a small kitchen that blended into the living room, a narrow hallway leading to the bedroom, bathroom, and laundry area. But it was mine. I wanted to save money, sure, but I also craved just a little more freedom than I had living in my childhood bedroom. It felt like the perfect middle ground. Even though the space was technically separate from the main floor of the house, there was a door at the top of the stairs that connected my apartment to the upstairs, my parents' part of the house. That door had a lock, but when they were out of town, I usually left it open. It was just easier that way, especially since the fridge upstairs was way bigger and better stocked than the tiny one in my apartment. It wasn't all sunshine, though. Even when they were gone, it often felt like they were still hovering over my shoulder, like I couldn't really relax. I couldn't invite friends over without worrying that we'd be too loud or that they'd somehow come home early and hear us. It was hard to explain, but it was a constant feeling of not being completely alone, even when I was. But one weekend, I got what I wanted: total privacy. My parents had gone away for a long weekend. That Friday night, I had two of my good friends, Anthony and Jay, over to hang out. We weren't doing anything crazy, just watching the hockey game, having a few drinks, and blasting some music, now that there was no one to complain about the volume. The three of us were just chilling on my massive sectional couch, which was one of my proudest pieces of furniture. It could comfortably fit all of us, and then some. As the night wore on, I got a good buzz going. I wasn't completely wasted, but I was definitely feeling loose and sleepy by the end of the game. Both Anthony and Jay had driven over and were in no shape to drive home, so they ended up crashing on the couch. That was kind of the plan anyway. I said goodnight, left them to pass out on the couch, and headed to my room. I always locked my bedroom door out of habit, just something I did, no matter where I lived. The rest of the apartment was accessible, but my room was my sanctuary. I don't know how much time passed before I woke up again. Maybe an hour or two. It was dark, and everything had that eerie stillness that only comes in the early morning hours. I sat up, disoriented, trying to figure out what had woken me. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, creaking above me on the main floor of the house. At first, I assumed it had to be one of my friends. Maybe they got thirsty and went upstairs to grab water or a snack. But then I remembered. Anthony and Jay had both fallen asleep in the living room. Why would either of them go upstairs? Still, I brushed the thought away. Maybe they woke up and wandered. I didn't think too much of it and lay back down. Then, just a few minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of my bedroom doorknob gently twisting. Someone was trying to come in. I froze. The door was locked, thank God, but someone was definitely outside trying the handle. I waited, heart pounding, but the attempt stopped as quickly as it started. I figured maybe one of the guys had the half-drunk idea to ask me something, and then gave up when they found the door locked. Weird, but not unheard of. I didn't say anything. I just stayed still and quiet, and eventually, I fell back asleep. The next morning, Anthony was already gone when I woke up, which was typical of him. Jay was still groggy on the couch, rubbing his eyes when I came out to the kitchen. I asked if he remembered trying to come into my room during the night, and he just gave a half laugh and said he didn't think so, but he had no idea. He was pretty drunk. We went out to a local deli and grabbed bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches with some strong coffee, ate them in the backyard, and just chilled. He left not long after that, and I didn't think much more about the doorknob thing. I didn't even bother texting Anthony to ask. Honestly, I figured it wasn't worth it. I spent most of Saturday out with other friends. We were out and about all day, and even though we had a few drinks here and there, it was more of a marathon than a sprint. So I came home mostly sober that night. I was exhausted. I threw together a snack, cleaned up, and then collapsed into bed. But I didn't fall asleep right away. I watched some TV, letting my body relax. When I finally turned off the screen, the silence settled in, and with it came the noises. At first, it was faint, just some creaking above me. Then it got louder, almost like soft but distinct footsteps walking across the kitchen floor upstairs. I sat up and held my breath. It sounded almost exactly like the night before. I tried to tell myself it was just the house settling. Old houses make weird noises all the time, right? That's all it had to be. But something in my gut twisted. That quiet fear started bubbling up in the back of my mind again. I focused, listening, and then it happened again. The doorknob, it twisted, firmly, intentionally. Someone was trying my door again. This time, I jumped out of bed instantly. Not sluggish, not half asleep, just pure adrenaline. Then came the soft knock. It was just 2 light taps, but it was enough to chill me to the core. I grabbed my phone and started texting frantically. I messaged my parents, Anthony, Jay, anyone who might somehow be responsible for this. I prayed someone would reply and say, "Yeah, it's me. Sorry," but I got nothing. My parents didn't pick up. They were probably asleep. They weren't supposed to be back until Monday anyway. It couldn't be them. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a sound. I picked up a heavy flashlight from my dresser and crept to a corner of the room, crouching behind the tall dresser that partially blocked the view from the doorway. I was shaking. 10 minutes passed. No more knocks, no sound of footsteps, just silence. I called 911, whispering into the phone so quietly that the dispatcher had to ask me to repeat myself. I explained everything as best I could. She told me to stay put and keep the line open. I asked if she could have the officers come to my bedroom window instead of the door, since I didn't feel safe moving through the apartment. When the tap came at my window, I nearly cried from relief. A police officer stood there, shining his flashlight into my room. I unlocked the window and handed him my spare key to the side door. Within moments, I heard them entering my apartment. 2 officers did a sweep of the downstairs, which didn't take long. It's not a big space. Then we went up to the main floor. I walked behind them as they cleared room after room. When we got to my parents' bedroom, I stood back while they went in. Then, shouting, commotion. I stepped closer and saw one of the most disturbing things I've ever witnessed in my life. A man was being dragged out from under my parents' bed. He was tall, filthy, with matted hair, and a face that looked like it hadn't seen peace in a very long time. He wore a hoodie and gym shorts, and the expression he gave me as they pulled him out was filled with pure hatred. I was told to wait downstairs while they restrained him and took him outside. When the officers finally brought him out the front door, I watched from the window as they walked him down the path. One of them asked me if I recognized him. I shook my head immediately. I had never seen him before in my life. After he was gone, I felt like I could breathe again. The officers told me that he didn't seem to have taken anything, and it looked like he was probably just squatting or hiding out. They said if I wanted to pursue charges or get more information, I could follow up at the precinct. I texted my parents and friends the moment the police left, even though it was the middle of the night. Only a couple people responded. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with every light on until morning. My parents were shocked when I told them what happened. But since nothing was stolen, and because the guy was likely homeless and mentally unstable, they didn't want to press charges. They said they'd be changing all the locks when they got home. I don't know how he got in. Maybe I forgot to lock the side door that night Anthony and Jay came over. Maybe he snuck in while we were distracted, laughing and blasting music. Or maybe, just maybe, he had already been inside the house, hiding, waiting. That's the part that haunts me the most. I was about 15 years old in 2008, the kind of age where you feel grown up, but still rely on the safety and comfort of your parents being around. One evening, my mom and dad decided to head out to the casino for the night, leaving me home alone with our black Labrador, Abby. I didn't mind being alone. Those quiet, unsupervised hours usually felt like a small taste of freedom. Plus, Abby was always great company. She was gentle, loyal, and had the kind of intuition dogs are famous for. I trusted her presence more than I ever realized I would. It was around 11 p.m., and I was holed up in my bedroom, lights dimmed, chatting away with friends on Instant Messenger, back when that was still a thing, and watching random videos on YouTube. Just your typical teenage night in. Suddenly, Abby began barking from the living room. Not a playful bark, or one of those little "I heard a squirrel" alerts. This was loud, sharp, and insistent. It was enough to make me pause mid-sentence as I typed. I figured maybe my parents had come home early, and Abby was just doing her usual routine of greeting them with noisy excitement. I kept typing for another minute, expecting to hear the sound of the front door opening or keys jangling, but nothing. Her barking didn't stop. Curious and growing slightly uneasy, I got up and padded down the hallway toward the living room. Abby was standing rigidly in front of the windows that faced our driveway, her ears perked and body tense, barking like she saw something. The lights outside were off, and the darkness beyond the glass was impenetrable. I squinted, pressing my face close to the window, but all I could see was one car in the driveway. Ours. My parents hadn't returned. Trying to rationalize it, I told myself maybe she'd heard a neighbor's car door slam shut, or perhaps a loud truck rumbled down the road. Our house sat along a fairly busy street, and even at that hour, it wasn't unusual to hear cars passing by or the occasional motorcycle roaring in the distance. Still, Abby wasn't one to bark unless something really set her off. I shrugged it off, gave her a reassuring pat on the head, and went back to my room, trying to focus on my online chats and ignore the weird feeling that had started to crawl up my spine. But over the next 5 minutes, the uneasiness didn't go away. If anything, it grew. Abby kept barking intermittently, running between rooms as if trying to follow something she couldn't quite track. I began to hear faint noises too, strange little creaks and thumps that I hadn't noticed before. At first, I tried to dismiss them as the house settling or wind brushing up against the siding. But deep down, I knew they were different. Then, I heard what sounded like a knock, soft but distinct, on the living room door. This time, my heart jumped into my throat. I froze for a second, just listening, trying to confirm I wasn't imagining it. Slowly, cautiously, I crept back into the living room, each step heavier than the last. I approached the windows again, peering out with my heart hammering. Nothing. The night was silent and still. I couldn't bring myself to look through the peephole. The thought of someone or something being right on the other side of the door, staring back at me, was more than I could handle. Instead, I double-checked the deadbolt, making sure the door was locked tight. Just as I turned to leave the room, another knock came, but this time, it wasn't from the front door. It came from the side of the house. A chill rushed down my back. I stood there, every nerve in my body on high alert, trying to process what was happening. My brain was racing. Was it my parents? Maybe confused or having trouble with their keys. Had they tried another entrance? But even as I thought it, it didn't feel right. Why would they come around to the side door? Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a doorknob rattling from the basement entrance. Panic swelled in my chest. That basement door wasn't easy to find. It was tucked away beneath the deck in our backyard. You had to walk around the entire house, down a small path behind the shrubs, then under the deck to even see it. Someone would only know it was there if they'd either been told or gone looking. The idea that a stranger had found it, or worse, already knew about it, terrified me. Abby was barking like mad now, growling, darting between rooms, her entire body stiff with tension. It felt like we were surrounded, like whoever, or whatever, was out there was moving methodically, from door to door, checking for a way in. Then the noises from the basement stopped. Silence. The sudden quiet was somehow worse than the knocking. I stood frozen, barely breathing. Every muscle in my body was tight, waiting, listening. Then, with no warning, Abby bolted down the stairs, barking more ferociously than I'd ever heard her. She wasn't a violent dog. Far from it. Abby was the kind of dog who'd let toddlers pull her ears without flinching. But right then, she sounded like a different animal entirely. I couldn't move. It felt like I stood there for ages, paralyzed by fear. Then it hit me. Abby had stopped barking. The silence was back, heavier than before. Something told me I had to act, fast. Snapping into motion, I called Abby back upstairs. She came sprinting up, still alert, but no longer growling. I shut and locked the interior basement door behind her, my hands shaking. Then I ran to my parents' bedroom, grabbed the cordless phone, no cell phone yet for me, and slid into their walk-in closet. Inside was one of the guns we kept for protection, carefully stored, but accessible in emergencies. Heart thudding, I clutched the phone in one hand and the gun in the other. I was about to dial 911 when the front door opened. My breath caught. Abby launched herself from the closet, bolting toward the door. I shouted after her, terrified of what, or who, had just come in. But then I heard familiar voices. My parents. I ran out to find them standing in the entryway, petting Abby and giving me confused looks. I must have looked like a ghost, pale, wide-eyed, still clutching the phone. Through panicked breath, I recounted everything. The knocks, the sounds, Abby's reaction, the basement door. My mom's face went pale, and my dad's eyes narrowed with fury. He grabbed his own gun and immediately did a full sweep of the house, inside and out. Every door, every window. Every shadow was checked, but he didn't find anyone. Whoever it was had vanished. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed curled up on the couch with Abby by my side, heart still pounding, jumping at every creak and groan the house made. The next afternoon, just as I was starting to calm down, there was a knock at the front door. My stomach dropped. I slipped into the hallway, letting my dad answer it. When he opened the door, standing there with a smug grin and an envelope in hand, was my Uncle Pete. Now, Uncle Pete was a strange man, always had been. Nothing overtly criminal or dangerous about him, at least not on paper. But everyone in the family agreed he gave off weird vibes. He had this uncomfortable energy, especially around women and kids. Even adults said he made their skin crawl after spending too much time around him. He was the kind of guy you instinctively avoided, even if you couldn't explain why. I listened from the hallway as my dad stiffly accepted the envelope. Uncle Pete said something along the lines of, "Tried stopping by last night to drop this off, but no one answered." That was all I caught before my dad slammed the door in his face. When I came out to ask what happened, my dad's face was red with fury. His jaw clenched. "That was him," he said. "It was Pete. He was the one sneaking around the house last night." I felt cold all over. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a thank you card with a gift card tucked inside. Apparently, a gesture of appreciation for helping his daughter, my cousin, with her softball training. A nice thought, if it had come during the day, not if it came after dark, in total silence, by way of trying every single door, including the hidden basement entrance. My dad had threatened him during that short exchange at the door. After that day, we never really saw or spoke to Uncle Pete again. To this day, I still have so many questions. What was he thinking? Why didn't he just leave the card in the mailbox? Why didn't he call first? Or at least take the hint when nobody answered the door? And the scariest question of all, what would have happened if Abby hadn't been there? What would have happened if he'd gotten inside? I still don't know. But I'm thankful Abby was there. That sweet, brave dog most likely scared him off before he could do anything worse. I'll never forget the way she stood guard that night. Because of her, I'm able to tell this story and sleep at night, even if I sometimes still flinch at knocks on the door.